Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Z. I'm a clinical psychologist specializing in transgender care. Welcome to my channel. Today, I'd like to discuss with you how can you possibly grieve, if you will, the part of your identity that belongs to your old self. By the old self, I mean your initial gender assigned at birth. A lot of times people reach out to me and they ask me, how do I grieve? How do I move forward? How do I let go? Sometimes people say they'll take a look at their photographs of their gender assigned at birth and they really struggle and they get very emotional. Sometimes people feel like the part of them has died, which I personally think is quite drastic. So how can you allow yourself to move forward and how to actually do that? That's what I'd like to discuss with you today, because this is really important. And I have my own perspective on this idea. So please bear in mind that what I share with you today is just my personal opinion as a psychologist on this issue. You may completely disagree with how I see this, and you may have your own ideas of how you see this. And if you do, please do share, comment below. There's no one way to go through this process as a human being. So once you do realize that you're not really feeling any congruency with your gender assigned at birth, in other words, when you do realize that you have a different authenticity to your actual gender identity, then at that point, a lot of you start experiencing gender dysphoria. That's when you have aha moment. And that aha moment can range from a very young age all the way into very, very late adulthood. Regardless, when you do have that aha moment, that's when you really start to struggle, especially if you're older, not a child, with ideas of what can I do about it. And a lot of you who have struggled with these concepts have decided to do something about it, whether it is to accept and to embrace who you are, or to accept, to embrace, and then to move forward with some elements of gender transition. Remember, gender transition is not a must, but if it is for you, you may have decided to do that. So regardless, a lot of people tend to decide something in order to alleviate the tension that they tend to feel. And especially this video, by the way, is going to be made for those of you who have moved closer to your expression of your authentic self, whether it is externally, internally, or both. So what does happen when you have lived part of your life as gender assigned at birth and as people relating to you in regards through the lens of that particular gender, and then now you're living your life in your authentic sense of gender? What happens to that old part of yourself? What happens to that old aspects of your gender identity? Does it suddenly die? A lot of people use the term die and dead naming as a way to relate to their old names. I personally don't think that's a good idea, because when we're saying a part of us has died, that's not quite psychologically accurate, because there's never a part of us that truly fully dies. What I prefer to a part of you that has died, I prefer a part of you has evolved. The person that you used to be evolved into the person you are today. And the truth is, you're going to evolve into a different person years and years from now. Now, your gender identity may be fixed and stable over time, your authentic sense that you are in right now. Or your gender identity can be mutable and interchangeable, as it is for some people, and also change throughout the time. So I prefer the word that you are evolving. We're constantly evolving. It's not that parts of us literally are dying. I think dying is too far-fetched. I think there's parts of us that are shifting. They're growing, they're changing, and for some people, unfortunately, they're not growing, they're actually arresting, they're regressing. So as a human inner self, we either can progress and grow and level ourselves up, or we can regress and as a result do the opposite, or we can pretty much maintain plateaus. Those are, in my opinion, three most common levels of self-development. And for a lot of you who have come into realization of your authentic self, you have leveled up, you have grown, you have matured, you have evolved. And so I prefer the word evolvement, because that's really what happens. So when people say, how do I grieve? I would prefer, instead of grieve and grieving, I would prefer acknowledging. I would prefer almost, what comes to mind with acknowledgement is respect and realization that this is part of yourself, that yourself, your overall self, is not something that is this tight very rigid ball that is never going to change, that yourself is multifaceted, and that it's a beautiful thing that yourself was able and allowed itself to grow and to expand. So instead of grieving, I really prefer to look at it as a process. I prefer to look at it as a shift that you have gone through the evolution of your life. Evolvement. I think I'm not saying it right. But this process of shifting and this process of becoming a more authentic self, in your cases, it happens to be in regards to gender. All of us are going through the process of evolution. All of us are evolving in different spheres of our life. Some people evolve closer to their vocation. Some people evolve closer to their particular attributes. Some people evolve closer to so many other aspects. In your case, it happened to be with gender, and it was a monumental and big shift. So instead of grieving, what I recommend is acknowledgement and respect for this process that has happened to you. Now, again, I would recommend actually celebration. I would recommend actually celebrating in a way that is perhaps appropriate for you. For me, if I were to celebrating my authentic self and involvement into my authentic self, I would probably cater a dinner. I'd probably invite some of the closest people to me. I'd probably make a toast to myself. I'd probably acknowledge the growth that I went through. Because remember, leveling up and stepping into your authentic self, in your case, it happens to be with gender, is not easy. Each one of you can attest to that. Each one of you can attest that it was challenging, that first you had to go through the fear. First you had to go through so many other challenges, through resistances, even inner resistances, resisting stepping into your own shoes. Even now, living authentically can, for a lot of you, is a big challenge, especially given the world today. So you really need to celebrate your sense of resilience. You really need to commend yourself on your own ability to own who you are unapologetically. And that's not easy to do. So I don't really like the word grief, because grief means we lost something that is no longer there. I think that old part of you is still there. It's now different. It's now part of your more authentic self. Some parts of it, some artificial parts of your assigned gender and birth have been dropped away because they no longer serve you. But so many aspects of still who you are still very much there. So I really say, let's throw a celebration to who you are. Let's really throw a party and celebrate it, because not a lot of people have guts to step into their own authenticity. This is why a lot of people struggle today in careers that they absolutely hate, day in and day out, coming home and hating what they do, waking up and hating going to their work. This is why so many people are in relationships that they don't like, that they're unhappy, but they're afraid to divorce because they're afraid to be alone. All of the things I'm talking about all of them have to do with stepping into your authentic self. And that's really, really difficult to do. So instead of grief, let's celebrate. That's what I would really recommend. And again, I'm not a big fan of I even made a short video talking about the problem with using the language death naming, because death naming again implies that part of you has died and that part of you is still very much alive. It's just that it has evolved into the speaker part of you. And guess what? You're going to continue to evolve. So I hope this is helpful, because people ask me this all the time, how they can move forward, how they can move on, how can they make changes in their life. And I say we're looking at it a little bit differently. I think we need to look at it as a whole self-growth, self-evolution perspective, and as a way of celebrating ourselves constantly, shifting and leveling up versus not. Now, of course, if regression happened, if instead of leveling up, you have arrested your development, unfortunately, that's probably not something to be celebrated. That's something to be acknowledged, that something is holding me back, something is really pulling me back downwards versus growing upwards. I'm thinking about a plant that grows upwards that you need to nurture. In this case, this plant is not being nurtured and it's wilting way down into the ground. So in that case, it's really important to acknowledge what is it that's holding you down and help yourself to level up. So comment below, how do you, I'm going to put in quotation marks, grieve this part of yourself? I really think that, again, it's just a union that has happened between the past and the present that created the person that you are today, and that union is going to continue to happen. That is such a fundamental part of evolution. So comment below, let me know. I love hearing all of your comments, and I will see you all next time. Bye.